and to all of the jurors who spent 2.5 months getting it right. And now it's time for the civil justice system to take over. Ursula and her family are extremely proud to exercise their constitutional rights to a wrongful death case, to recover for the unthinkable loss of her only son, of a wonderful brother, of a caretaker, a father figure, and so much more, as well as the suffering that Odin Lloyd must have gone through at the hands of his killers. And here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we have a unique law that allows them to recover as well for punitive damages in the case of reckless activity, here stated as extreme atrocity or cruelty. Now, there are several differences between the civil case and the criminal case. As you all know from these high-profile criminal cases, those cases need to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Not so in a civil case. In a civil case, we need to prove our case merely by a preponderance of the evidence, a simple tilting of the scales, more likely than not. Because of that standard, the different standards, we will be urging the court not to even allow Mr. Hernandez to offer certain defenses. He should be precluded from denying his involvement in this atrocity. And we will be doing that in the civil case. The witnesses will be different in the civil case. Certainly, we are entitled to call any witness from the criminal case, and we will. But we will also call different witnesses in the civil case, including Mr. Aaron Hernandez. And when we do, he will no longer be able to hide behind any sort of Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination because he is already convicted of the crime. And when we do call him, Ursula Ward will be by our side to look him in the eye once he goes under oath and tells his story. Finally, you all know that during the criminal trial, there was so much attention paid to Mr. Hernandez, his background, his athleticism, and so on. It's going to be different in the civil case, for we will focus our attention on Odin Lloyd and his family and their relationships. And although it was Aaron Hernandez who had the incredible athletic ability, in our civil case, we intend to show that it was Odin Lloyd who was the true All-American. All-American is not a term often used to describe a young man from the inner city, and that's too bad because there are so many fine young men doing so many fine things. The Odin Lloyds of the world don't often make the front page headlines. Not so in this case, though. This case is different. And in the end, in the civil case, when we're done, we hope and fully expect for everyone to remember the name Odin Lloyd long after they forget the name Aaron Hernandez. As to recoverable assets, there has been a stay or a hold placed on the civil case until the criminal proceeding could conclude. And now that that's happened, we will respectfully petition the court to open up the case, to allow us to get the information we need under oath to identify and secure assets and preserve them for this deserving family. As to the Patriots, our position is simply that if any money is owed to Mr. Hernandez from the Patriots, that money should also be secured for the benefit of Odin Lloyd's family. Many of you have asked, what are you looking for? What are you asking for? What's your demand in this case? We haven't made a demand, in part because for Ursula and her family, this has never been about money. In part because no amount of money is sufficient to satisfy, to compensate this family for this unthinkable loss. And when we do settle on an amount, it needs to accurately reflect the evidence and reflect the horrific loss of a wonderful son, brother, father figure, and so much more. I want to finish by saying that on the heels of the Boston Marathon, as Ursula and her family continue to run their race for justice, they do so forever, Boston strong. Thank you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to ask Ursula to address you. Ursula?
Good afternoon. My name is Ursula Ward, Odin Lloyd's mother. First, I would like to thank the Heavenly Master for all He has done, for me and my family, and also continue to do for us. I would like to thank everyone for their cards, prayers, letters, in whatever way you showed us your support. We appreciate everything. Thank you. Odin was my firstborn of 3. Odin was my only son. Odin was the backbone of the family. Odin would take care of his sisters, Olivia and Shaquilla, while I would go to work at night. Odin always made sure they do their homework before going to bed or going outside to play, or even have company. Odin was a proud young man. Odin would ride his bike to work from Boston to Norwood, and would still go to football practice every day. Odin had a beautiful young lady in his life, Shinia, and a job. And that was one of the most things that make Odin proud of himself. Odin was a young man who never took life for granted. Odin always says, "Ma, if you have life, you smile." And that's why anytime, and I mean anytime you see Odin, you always see that beautiful pink gum coming to you. Odin was one of the most well-mannered young men you will ever meet. If I get angry with Odin for anything at all, Odin would prefer to walk away from me before disrespect. I would know when Odin is okay with me because the first word come out of his mouth is "Mommy Dukes." And when I hear those words, I know, okay, he's not upset anymore. Odin loved to eat. You always find Odin in the kitchen or in the living room watching ESPN. Odin would run from the house on Faison Street to Franklin Park Zoo every single day. The day they told me my son was shot and killed, I thought my life ended with his. I always wish I was there to take those bullets for Odin. But to God be the glory. I am going to see Odin handsome, loving, beautiful face again. I will be able to hug my son again. Odin was loved by many. Odin will be missed tremendously. Odin is a hero in my book. I thank you, and God bless you all.
Okay, questions?
Doug, you said that anyone will be called to testify, even Aaron Hernandez. What about Patriots, Robert Kraft, Patriot Organization, could you be calling them?
Anything's possible if it's relevant. No one wants to unnecessarily disturb any professional or anybody, but if it's important and if it's part of zealously representing our client, then we'll do what we have to.
You know, you said that you have any idea of the assets? I mean, he's got his home in Monroe, Attleboro. Do you know anything?
We have an attachment on that house.
Where else will you be looking? Where will you be looking for assets, money?
Well, that's why it's so important to open up the case so that we can get folks perhaps who manage this money or folks who might know where that is to testify under oath and give us that information. We've done what we can with our own investigation, and I won't reveal what the results of that are, but we really need to have that freedom to do what we do in most cases.
Are you confident he has money?
I'm not confident he has money, but he sure has received a lot over his career, and we're curious as to where it might be.
A little over a year ago, a judge put a freeze on that $3.2 million he may or may not be owed. Has there been anything resolved on that front? Is he owed that money or not?
This is Don Grady. This is Don Grady. He'll take that
Thank
question.
you. That has not been resolved yet. I know that's part of it. And then,
Into the mic.
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. That issue is still pending before the court, as well as I believe the NFL Players Association has a grievance about that particular monetary amount. There was an agreement made with the Patriots as a they originally were a defendant in the case. They no longer are. The reach and apply action was resolved that money would be held until there was a resolution with the NFL Players Association. The Patriots were heard on the issue because they have their own issues, and we would be notified when those issues would come forward. So that's where that stands now. That's been in that kind of position during the criminal proceedings.
So the Patriots have been taken off as reach and apply defendants in the lawsuit?
There has been a stipulation of dismissal with that agreement in place, so that
Just explain that a little bit.
it means that we have an understanding that before the Patriots will release any monies, they will notify counsel first, and this will be handled through the court.
So they're no longer listed as a reach and apply defendant on the lawsuit itself?
They've been dismissed.
There's been a stipulation of dismissal filed on their behalf.
Do you need to wait for the union grievance issue to be resolved before you can proceed in this case? Or?
No, we have many things we'd like to do in the meantime.
What about the other cases that are still pending, the murder case in Boston and Alexander Bradley's own civil lawsuit? How does that affect your ability to go forward with your case?
It shouldn't affect. Our position is it shouldn't affect our ability to move forward. Who knows what else is out there, and it shouldn't go on ad infinitum. We should have the right to now proceed and to represent our client, and in those cases, they should have the right to do the same.
Doug, is there any hierarchy or priority of who gets what? I'm thinking about, obviously, your case. There's his Hernandez's lawyers, which I assume his criminal lawyers, who cost a lot of money. His toddler daughter. Is there any priority of who gets money first?
There is no set priority. We have our opinions about how that should happen, but that will be sorted out probably by the courts.
What about the child's trust? Did you go after her trust if there is one?
I can't address that. That's premature to even think about something like that. I wouldn't think that would be something you could reach anyway.
By open up the case, you mean that you want to have access to all of his records to see exactly what his assets are. Can you just explain how?
So the case was filed, obviously, back in 2013. During the course of the criminal proceedings, it has been held in abeyance, although we have tried at different times to keep it going and to get more information about some of these issues, especially assets. The court felt it prudent at that time to put a stay on it, and we've respected that stay, obviously. Now that the criminal proceedings have ended, at least on the trial court level, it's our position we can go back and start to reinvigorate and start to move forward on that case. So that's what we intend to do.
There are people who should be deposed. Did you handle his money? What did you do with it? Where was it transferred? We'd like to ask those questions. We haven't been able to do that yet, but we hope to be able to do that soon.
So is there, getting back to all the lawsuits that he's facing right now, is there kind of a sense there's a race by all the different parties involved?
First off, I've discussed our cases with at least the attorney who represents the other two death victims here in Massachusetts. They've been very amicable discussions. We will obviously first try to sort things out amongst ourselves. And if we can't do that, then we'll agree to disagree. And again, that's what the court's job is. But I think all of us have our priorities straight. We want to find out information. We want to secure globally for anyone who suffered at Aaron Hernandez's hands, and sort of that's a step two. So there's been very amicable discussions. Let's just put it that way.
Have you spoken to Alexander Bradley's attorney?
No, I have not.
You said that you conducted your own internal investigation as best you could into his financial situation. Is there anything left as far as you are aware?
I don't want to reveal the results of that investigation at this time. Suffice it to say, we really need the court to help us.
How much money do you estimate he made during the course of his career?
No, I don't have. I'm sorry, I don't have that number at the top of my fingers.
I have an answer. I have an answer for you. A lot.
You said that you would like to put Aaron Hernandez on the stand. Is there a particular question, first and foremost, in this board that you would like to ask Aaron Hernandez?
She wants to ask what happened. Very simple. What happened? And then the next question ought to be, why?
Can he be forced to testify? Can he be compelled the way he would be in a criminal case to take the stand?
In a criminal case, he
In a
couldn't.
criminal case where
He
but
couldn't be
we're-
compelled. But
we're
once
we're a regular witness.
once jeopardy has been resolved, and once the criminal proceedings have been resolved, his Fifth Amendment rights will no longer attach, and therefore, once he doesn't have the barrier of the Fifth Amendment to invoke, or the privilege of the Fifth Amendment, he'll be compelled to testify in a civil case.
He could still theoretically still say, I'm not going to do it, and take the contempt charge.
He could, and then the courts would have their remedy as to what they do. Civil contempt can be onerous as well, and there can be lots of different available methods the judge can deal with that, but I'd leave that to the court to decide. But we won't have the Fifth Amendment barrier.
Does the appeals
How unusual
process
is this?
affect his?
Compelling him to testify against himself. How unusual is this?
It is not unusual in a civil case where there is a criminal case. There are oftentimes criminal cases do go along with civil cases. DUI cases that involve car accidents obviously would involve those types of things as well. So it's not an unknown situation.
In a civil case, the defendant is almost always required to testify, and usually by us, so that we can gain information to help our client against the defendant.
And usually do they get up there and say anything?
Usually they get up there.
How will you proceed now with depositions of anyone who you think has information about his assets? Or
The normal order in a civil case is first to send out what I call paper discovery. A lot of questions we call interrogatories, and a different set of questions that are really requests to produce documents, document requests. So we're asking questions for people to answer them in writing, under oath, and we're asking them to produce documents. We then digest that information and decide who are some apt people to depose, and then we take their live depositions, sometimes in conjunction with utilizing these documents. It can be time-consuming and complex, but it's the best and most thorough way to get to the truth.
What are some of the assets that have been attached in the other 3 civil suits, and you would not have access to those pending some agreement you reach with those lawyers, as you said, correct?
I believe that after our attachment, others have also attached the house. I really don't think I could speak to. I think that some may have actually attempted to join in on the action with respect to the Patriots as well.
Ursula, what is it you hope to gain out of this wrongful death suit?
Sorry?
I was just asking Ursula the reasons and what she hoped to gain from this wrongful death.
She's not going to take questions, but I can tell you from speaking to her that she wants a complete justice. The justice system is comprised of 2 parts. There's the criminal justice system, and she is so grateful that that did its job. And now she wants the second half of justice, the civil justice system, however that can be expressed.
Is she looking for acknowledgement in some form?
I believe it would be something that she would appreciate if people apologize, but again, I'm not going to put questions to Ursula at this time.
How long does a case like this, you don't know for sure, obviously, but how long would something like this last? Could this be years?
It usually from the beginning to end takes a few years. The beginning has already started.
2013?
Correct.
There's technically a track that is assigned to a death case. However, because of the long stay involved, because of the criminal proceedings, that probably will be even more extensive. Then it would take longer than it might even on the ordinary track. Not sure. It's going to depend. We do have a lot of the evidence preserved because of the criminal case. We do know what witnesses will say, and maybe that will help us shortcut that area, but the other areas will not be shortcut.
So it could take a few more years.
Yes.
It could.
And as of now, the
But-
stay is still in effect. You're just asking that the court lift that?
We will be.
Correct.
Any idea roughly how many witnesses you would call?
No idea.
What's your timetable for, your next, when you're gonna start filing requests for these things?
In the very near future, I would expect within the next few weeks, we're going to have something put to the court.
Just to clarify what you said about the trust, you said that's something that you don't think you'd be able to reach. You mean that would not be available in terms of recouping funds? Or
I mean, that's so far away from our mindset, I decline to answer that question.
And as far as people who would be calling, testify, or deposing, really anybody who knows anything about the whereabouts of his assets?
That's
That's
certainly
certainly part of it.
That's a priority. That's certainly a priority because as we speak, who knows what's going on with those assets? Who knows how they're depleting them? And our job is to make sure that there's money left for Ursula and her family. We have to do everything we can to preserve those assets.
Do you have reason to believe that he's hiding his assets now or working to hide some of his money?
I can't answer that because, again, we don't have discovery. We don't have anything to base opinions on.
You declined to release the results of initial investigation. Please, though, describe to us how complex it is to unearth.
There are handicaps that didn't used to exist. There are new rules out there that really don't allow us to look at people's bank accounts, for example. That's new. A few years ago, people were able to do that. So we are further restrained than we used to be. And again, it's why we will respectfully ask the court to help us.
Ms. Ward, do you forgive Aaron Hernandez still?
Do you have any indication that he has been hiding any assets or moving money around to?
We wouldn't know, to be honest with you. And we don't expect he's going to be very forthcoming about that information. So far, it hasn't been forthcoming. Of course, if it is given to us, we would certainly take it. But it hasn't been forthcoming. We don't know what he's doing with his money at this particular point in most regard.
Just a technical question is, as it regards calling him to the stand and his Fifth Amendment right, does the appeals process affect that? If he says, I'm appealing the ruling, does he still have his Fifth Amendment right? Or?
He may, but our position is that shouldn't stop us. And if it does, then we'll have to wait till after that process and still do it. One way or the other, he's going to have his time.
Is that important to you to call him, despite the fact that you could win the case on preponderance, given the conviction, without putting him on the stand?
I think it's important.
What happens if you go through this whole process, all of the discovery, and you find that there really is no money there?
No.
Do you continue to move forward, call him to the stand just for the sake of calling him to the stand to hear what he has to say, or what happens?
We cross that bridge when we get to it, and we consult with our client because that's who I care about.
Judge, when you get Aaron Hernandez on the stand, if you do, what are you going to ask him? What are you going to say to Aaron Hernandez on the stand?
We haven't decided that yet.
Is there any thought that you might expand this to other people who were, involved in either the crime itself or the cover-up, like Shayon Jenkins or any of the other people?
It's possible that other people get brought in, but we want to do that very carefully. And certainly the others responsible, the others who were involved that evening in the death, may or may not be brought in. But again, it's all part of the process.
There are two others charged with murder,
Right.
and you only filed a wrongful death lawsuit against one of them. Is that because of his financial situation compared to the other two, or is it because you think he's primarily responsible?
As I said, they may be brought in, but
right
we
now,
believed at the
it's
time. Well, at the time that the case was originally filed, I think all of the emphasis was on Mr. Hernandez, and that was probably the thinking.
So if you had evidence or proof that Aaron Hernandez transferred some of his money to Shayon Jenkins or to his mother, for example, if you had evidence or proof of that, would you go after those assets?
Yeah, that would be dubbed a fraudulent conveyance because the civil case is pending, and we would go after those assets.
So even if you don't have a certain asset attached, if he somehow transferred that asset to, say, Shayon
If it happened after the case was filed, it depends on the timing.
Are there any individuals you know you will be calling to testify at this point, and who might they be?
Can't answer that question too early.
Aaron Hernandez.
Aaron Hernandez.
I can tell you that.
That's one.
Initially, the breach of apply defendants listed with Patriots and Kraft Enterprise, was that simply because the payment to Hernandez of that money would have come out?
I believe that was a contractual understanding and an effort to be sure that you reached every possibility of people that would have, or entities that would have been involved with that transaction. So you would have to name all of them to make sure that they were all part of it. So
Those
that's
have
what,
all been wiped based on that stipulation?
yes.
So the stipulation again is what? That Ursula would have access to any money owed, or?
There's been no determination as to whether the money is actually owed. The Patriots dispute that. That is, again, part of the NFL Players Association process, and may indeed be part of this particular process. Not sure about that. However, it's just an agreement that there will be the money will not be released. It will not go to anybody until such time as these issues have been brought and have been ruled upon by a court of law.
It just kind of puts a hold on the money.
It really does.
It protects the money. It preserves the money.
Did you guys get involved at all in arguing that that money should be released from the Patriots, that under the contract it should be released to Hernandez, and then once it is?
I think that's really a matter between those two parties. We'd like to, but I don't think that would be entertained.
You're talking about that $3.2 million
Yes.
that Hernandez believes is owed to him by the...
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stay here.
Donald.
Thank you.
Spell your last name?
G, not like the quarterback.
Okay.
G is in George, R-A-D-Y.